Introduction. The world is not divided into good people and bad people. If it were so, it'd be very easy to avoid being manipulated by people. It's easy to recognize and identify the Ted Bundy and Hitlers of the world. But all around you, there are everyday people whose wants and desires may put you in a bad position. Your friends, co-workers, and even family members may be manipulating you with dark psychology, and you might not even know it. The interesting part of it all is that they might not know it too. Dark psychology refers to different techniques used to control, coerce, or manipulate people for devious, malicious, or narcissistic purposes. A lot of people use these techniques without actually studying dark psychology. You have to admit that dark psychology has an ominous ring to it. It sounds like something you would hear in an occultic movie about mind control. But this is not the case. In fact, as you'll discover in this book, many of the skill sets that practitioners of dark psychology use are within the range of normal human behavior. The concept of dark psychology has been around for thousands of years, and they're seen in several everyday human interactions. The person being manipulated may not know they are being preyed upon, which is what makes the concept quite lethal. This book hopes to help you unravel the secrets of dark psychology as a tool for analyzing people and avoiding various forms of covert manipulation. As you'll discover as you read on, many of the people who use dark psychology tactics don't even know they're using it. However, it is also possible to intentionally study and master the art either as a way to manipulate others or as a way to defend yourself from falling victim to manipulators. The main aim of this book is education. So even if you have no intention of weaponizing the things you will learn, you'll benefit greatly from learning to analyze people to determine their true intentions and guide against attempts to mind control you. Wouldn't you love that? Now more than ever, dark psychological tactics have become quite rampant as humans become more linked by the current wave of global interconnectedness. The harsh reality is that the world is not full of kind people. There are narcissists, psychopaths, and manipulators out there. There are also everyday people trying to get you to buy a product you don't need or sign you up for a Ponzi scheme. It is in your best interest to learn how to analyze these people, and there's no better way to do so than by learning the tool of their trade, dark psychology. In the next few chapters, we'll explain what dark psychology is, and you'll learn the various tactics that practitioners of this art use. You'll also learn how to beat manipulators at their game by analyzing them and turning their weapons against them. You'll also learn the secrets for reading body language and tips to avoid covert mind control. Ready to go? Let's get started. If you were to Google dark psychology, you'll most likely discover several differing definitions for the term. The reason why there are no standardized definitions for dark psychology is because it is not an actual academic field of psychology. Studies into the field are limited, even though there is clear evidence that people have been using the principles and techniques of dark psychology for centuries. By way of definition, dark psychology refers to the various arts of manipulation, persuasion, and mind control, studied and practiced by manipulators and used on others for their own gain. The term dark psychology only came into use recently. However, the concepts have been at work for hundreds of years, even though they've not been grouped together or collectively studied as a field of psychology before. The fact that dark psychology lies beyond the realm of academic psychology studies does not mean it is inexistent or fake. Many people prefer to lump it under the field of abnormal psychology, which is concerned with the study of various types of abnormal behavior in humans. A closer look at human history and human behavior from times past shows that the sort of behavior currently classified under the field of dark psychology has been around for as long as there's been human interaction. People around us use dark psychological tactics every day as a means to influence, coerce, or manipulate people to do what they want. In fact, you might even be using them yourself without even knowing. Every human is meant to be in charge of their own thoughts. What dark psychology does is that it gives someone else the power to rule those thoughts and the actions that result from them. At the end of the day, the aim of dark psychology is to put you under someone else's control without you even knowing it. This influence can be either positive or negative, depending on the motive of the manipulator. The person who practices dark psychology plays games with the other person's thoughts, emotions, and feelings to achieve their own goals. However, it is important to note that dark psychology isn't only studied by those looking to use it to get others to do their bidding for their own benefits. People may also study dark psychology as a form of self-defense. Getting an understanding of dark psychology helps you to avoid being influenced by others against your will. Mastering the principles of dark psychology also helps you understand and relate to why some people act the way they do. What dark psychology isn't. Being such a controversial field, dark psychology is shrouded in mystery, and it's commonly confused for several other techniques of mind control. There are several myths and misconceptions about the subject. Here are a few of them. Dark psychology is not hypnosis. Many so-called dark psychology adherents often promise that they can teach others how to trick people into doing their every bidding. Hypnosis involves using a series of well-placed commands in a string of distracting words to bewilder people into disengaging their critical thinking and complying with your instructions. It's all about total and complete control for a specific period of time, and this isn't what dark psychology is about. Cult sect follower. You've probably heard stories about cult leaders who use their powers to get their followers to do dangerous and crazy things to others, or even to themselves. These cult leaders often use solid psychological techniques that involve power dynamics and manipulation to ensnare people. However, if anyone promised you that you could use the techniques of dark psychology to make people your follower, they'd be wrong. Dark psychology is not brainwashing. Brainwashing involves getting total control over someone for a particular period of time. Its effects tend to dissipate with time, and it only works on a minority of people. Being brainwashed is completely different from dark psychology. It is not a psychopathy. Perhaps the reason for this confusion is that people often classify dark psychology as a subset of abnormal psychology. But dark psychology isn't the same thing as psychopathy. Psychopaths have a mental disorder, and they're often good at using dark psychology. However, not everyone who uses dark psychology is a psychopath. What dark psychology entails. Dark psychology triad. As earlier explained, contrary to common belief, dark psychology does not enable anyone to get full and total control over another person's mind. Rather, it is a set of techniques that allow people to pull at someone's mental strings in a bid to manipulate them to their advantage. Dark psychology is often associated with a concept of crime psychology known as the dark triad. People who display these traits often make use of dark psychology to achieve their aim. Narcissism. The term narcissism is derived from the Greek myth of Narcissus. Narcissus was a handsome hunter who one day fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. People who display this character trait are selfish and arrogant. This makes them lacking in empathy, boastful, and unable to accept criticism. They dream of being adorned and worshipped, and they often resort to dark psychological techniques of manipulation and persuasion to achieve this. Machiavellianism. The term Machiavellianism is often associated with Niccolò Machiavelli, an Italian diplomat and politician who wrote a book in 1513 that many considered an endorsement of arts relating to deceit and cunningness in diplomacy. People who exhibit this trait are known to be cold, lacking in morality or emotions, and excessively motivated by self-interest. Psychopathy. Psychopaths are often charming and friendly on the surface, but they often lack empathy and remorse, which makes them prone to demonstrating antisocial behavior. They're also impulsive and volatile. It is important to note that there is a distinction between demonstrating psychopathic traits and being an actual psychopath, especially when it comes to criminal violence. Dark psychology and, in fact, the dark triad personality traits are seen in operation as a tool for social manipulation in human relationships, politics, workplace relations, and other group interactions. Who uses dark psychology and manipulation tactics? Although no one ever wants to be manipulated, it happens quite often. People who use dark psychological traits don't have to be narcissists or psychopaths. Normal everyday people use dark psychology tactics in our interactions with them on a daily basis. You'll see these tactics in use in TV commercials, by salesmen, managers, internet ads, and so on. In fact, if you have a kid, they'll have most likely tried to manipulate you at some point using some dark psychology tactics unknowingly. Sociopaths. Sociopaths don't have the same perception of right and wrong as the rest of society, so they don't feel remorse or emotions. They often use dark psychology tactics as a way to take advantage of people and build superficial relationships. Attorneys. It is common for some attorneys to use dark persuasion techniques to make and win their case in front of a judge or jury. Politicians. To get more votes during an election, politicians often use dark psychology techniques of manipulation and persuasion. In most cases, they aim to make their opponent appear unworthy or frame the current government as hopeless. This allows them to posture as the solution to the problem. They may also create a non-existent enemy and paint themselves as the right person to destroy that enemy. Salespeople. Salespeople are in the business of convincing people. To achieve this, they'll use dark tactics of persuasion and manipulation to convince you that their product is right for you or better than the competitors. Leaders. Leaders in all spheres of life need to be able to get their followers to align with their vision and comply with instructions. Some leaders often employ dark tactics to get these results from their followers. Public speakers. The best public speakers are able to rile up the emotional state of their listeners in order to sell some products or get them to take certain actions using dark psychology techniques. Why do people use dark psychology? Selfishness is a common denominator of dark psychology usage. Anyone with an agenda that places them over others will often use these tactics to achieve their selfish goals first, at the other person's expense. Rather than just a singular concept, you can think of dark psychology as a bag of tricks. People who use it often employ different techniques to cement control over others. Although these techniques have been around for a long time, the current wave of global connectivity has connected men and women from all over the world more than ever before. This gives manipulators greater access to people that would be otherwise beyond their reach. In fact, many cases of internet abuse show both individual and collective exhibitions of dark psychology traits in people. When most people describe dark psychology, they consider it as the use of manipulation and persuasion to harm others. This definition does not fully capture the motive behind dark psychology. It is not really as cut and dried as that. While dark psychology is a tendency to prey on other people, the motive isn't always a desire to do harm. Most times, people manipulate others with no real purpose or agenda in mind. Generally, people who are weak psychologically are at greater risk of being manipulated by a narcissist or psychopaths. This does not mean that the manipulator is necessarily more intelligent than the victim. It just means they possess a level of emotional awareness that allows them to easily detect the subjective emotional state of the other person. At the same time, they lack the empathy or emotional self-regulation to stop themselves from preying on the other person. It is critical to understand that to the manipulator, the victim in the dark psychological game is nothing but prey. Just as a lion, gorilla, or other wild animal prey on individual members that are young, weak, wounded, or in a disadvantaged position, so does the manipulator pick out prey. They examine different aspects of an individual's personality to determine who would make good prey and who would not. In the end, the relationship here is clearly one between predator and prey. The best way to avoid being preyed upon is to position yourself in a way that does not show you as weak or easy to pick on. This way, when predators size you up and try to assess your mind, you are one step ahead of them thanks to your knowledge of dark psychology. Chapter 2: Techniques and Applications of Dark Psychology. When most people think of psychopaths, what comes to mind is usually the villains in slasher movies, or even the real-life prolific serial killers like Ted Bundy. But you couldn't be more wrong. In fact, practitioners of dark psychology are all around you, and they're not knife-wielding monsters. They're right there with you as you read this. They're your office colleagues, your business partners, your friends, and even members of your own family. In fact, a lot of the people that make use of these techniques don't even know what dark psychology is. They are just naturally skilled at manipulation and may not have necessarily studied dark psychology. In the course of your interaction with people on a daily basis, you're guaranteed to meet toxic psychopaths and narcissists. But you'll also interact with regular people with a touch of these negative traits, seeking to manipulate and abuse you for their own benefits. As we will lay down in this chapter and subsequent chapters of this book, the best way to avoid being manipulated by people who knowingly or unknowingly practice this art is to get familiar with how they do it. Dark psychology is not a single trick or magic pill that brainwashes people. It is a collection of subtle techniques and complex acts that advance your goal of knowing people, connecting with them, and controlling them for your own benefit. The exact technique to be used by a manipulator using dark psychology depends on the specific situation. Here is a break of some of the common contexts in which dark psychology may find application, and the various techniques often used. Dark psychology for social manipulation. Humans are social animals. This means most of our interactions are on a group basis. People who use dark psychology to manipulate people in a social context often use the techniques on strangers or people they know. The goal is usually to get an individual or even a group of people to do something that will be beneficial to them. Some of the dark psychology techniques often used for social manipulation include manipulative negotiation techniques. Negotiators play an important role in social circles, and they're often adept at persuasion and manipulation. While negotiating is about convincing people to do things that they don't want to do, ethical negotiators often go about it with a collaborative mindset. Their goal is to get the best possible outcome for all parties involved. Negotiators that use dark psychology take the opposite approach. They may resort to flamboyant promises, threats, or use an information shock or blackmail to strong-arm the individual they're negotiating with into getting an outcome that is favorable to them. Guilt trip power move. Guilt tripping is a type of sympathy play. People who lack real power or any advantage in social situations often try to make people feel bad. Typically, they'll be given leeway and allowed to get what they want or get away with stuff simply because others feel guilty. Social scalper. Social scalpers are masters of using social exchange credits to get what they want. When they do things for you, they'll leverage the reciprocity principle to try to get more from you in the long run. Dark psychology in relationships. In dating and other forms of sexual relationship, people may employ dark psychology tactics to achieve their own personal aims, sexual and otherwise, at the expense of their partner. Some of the dark tricks that people tend to use in relationships include deception. Some men simply resort to outright deception just to get what they want, usually sex or attention, in a relationship. They may not even want the relationship and everything that comes with it. But to manipulate the victim into believing that they do, they may lie about their future plans to settle down and get married without an actual intention to commit or deliver on that promise. Chameleon manipulation. This refers to a phenomenon where the manipulator pretends to be the victim's ideal man or woman, even though he or she isn't. They may pretend that they have common interests, dress or act a certain way, or take on a completely different person to get the person's attention or to get the relationship going as quickly as possible. The prize mindset. This is a trait that is common to females. In this case, the female presents herself as a prize that must be won. She may lead the victim on to make him feel like he has a chance, then feign low interest, or turn him down just to make him chase her. The aim in situations like this is usually to get him to shower her with attention, money, or gifts. Seduction and sexual manipulation. Sex is one of the most powerful tools used for manipulation in relationships. Sex can be weaponized and used as positive reinforcement, reward, for desired behavior, or as negative reinforcement, punishment, for unwanted behavior. Using dark psychology in leadership. Leaders of a group or community of people may utilize different dark psychology tactics to decrease the authority of other members and consolidate their control over the group. Some of the tactics they might use include over-exaggerate problems. Some leaders may use misinformation or propaganda to make the group's problems appear bigger than they really are. They may leverage this to position themselves as a messiah capable of fixing the problem. This can also be used as a tactic to get group members to do more work or to exploit them for more resources. Mock or disempower discording voices. Groups are stronger when there's no conflict of opinions or dissenting voices. Good leaders will use diplomacy and democratic decision-making to keep differing voices satisfied and achieve unity. Leaders that use dark psychology resort to attacking any divergent voices instead. They may mock them, malign their personalities, and label them as deceitful or ignorant just to make sure other members of the group don't follow them. Create enemies. Leaders who use dark psychology often want to be seen as a hero, fighting the group's enemies. Their narcissist nature means they want to be seen as messiah, so they'll often fabricate a big enemy that only they can fight. In fear of this enemy, people will seek the protection of the leader and become subjugated to him. Using dark psychology in business. Companies and business leaders use dark psychology all the time. In fact, it is a common belief that having a bit of narcissism or Machiavellianism in you is necessary to build a successful business. Some of the most notable names in the business world are known to demonstrate these traits. Corporate bodies often employ these dark psychology tactics to manipulate their employees into sacrificing their personal comfort and self-interest for the success of the business. Some of the tactics they typically use include creating a false sense of community. You've probably heard slogans like, "Employees matter," "We are a team or a family," "We win or lose together," etc. Most companies these days seem to promote a community culture and advertise team spirit as one of the core values of their organization. This culture is so pervasive that people fail to see how it can be manipulative. Of course, teamwork is vital for companies to be successful. Still, talks like this are just a means to manipulate people into giving their all to the company, just because the company makes them feel like they matter. This tactic is built on the social accounting principle or law of reciprocation. Companies make people feel like they care about them. In return, the individual feels the need to reciprocate and give their all for the company. In the real sense, all they get is an empty slogan, their daily wage, and maybe some discount voucher or a lousy company party at the end of the year. In return, they are turned into 9-to-5 slaves, happy to work themselves to the bone for the company they love. The big picture illusion. Another tactic that companies use to manipulate employees is to tell them to focus on the greater good of the company or of the team. But what's good for the team isn't necessarily good for you as an individual. Promoting a big picture illusion often fosters group superiority over individual rights. People often end up working under unfavorable conditions because they've been told they're working towards a greater good. Also, having a team-first culture often makes it easy to hide or justify abuse and cruelty towards individuals in the workplace. Setting lofty goals. Every company these days wants everyone to think they're improving the world. Who doesn't want to be part of a team that's working towards the good of humanity or making a real impact? Stuff like this is the perfect front for narcissistic or sociopath CEOs to hide their selfish tendencies. Of course, someone is lying. The inner, selfish drive for profit is the main motivation for most businesses. When workers think they're working for a saintly vision, they'll work with greater dedication and for less money. It's the perfect deception to keep them in line. To sum up this chapter, dark psychology involves the use of the principles of psychology for abusive or damaging purposes. It includes a wide spectrum of techniques that can be applied to basically all aspects of life to achieve one's selfish intentions. Paying attention to all of these techniques and how they're applied in real life is the first step in getting a better glimpse into how people's minds work and analyzing them. Chapter 3. Understanding Manipulation. When most people think of dark psychology, they often think of evil, manipulative men like Hitler or psychopaths like Ted Bundy. However, one of the first things you have to understand about the dark arts is that every one of us has the capacity to do evil. The world is not divided between these two sets of people. So-called good people sometimes do bad things and vice versa. Your partners, friends, family members, and other people you love can use dark psychology tactics on you, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes the motive isn't even a desire to harm you. Think about someone buying you workout kits or signing you up for a gym membership, just so you can work out more and get in shape. On one hand, we could argue that you're being strong-armed into working out against your inherent desires. But the motive isn't entirely selfish or destructive. Indeed, attempting to classify humans as either good or bad is one of the main reasons why people fall victim to dark psychology tactics. Thus, the first thing we must do is desensitize our minds from such ideologies. Even you, in all your goodness, may be unknowingly manipulating the people you love in little ways. In simple terms, to manipulate someone is to control a person's thoughts, behavior, or actions unscrupulously for a desirable outcome. It is important to point out that manipulation attacks a person's thoughts and belief system, and not just the visible action. The manipulator targets the thoughts of the person they're trying to manipulate, because this is what influences their actions. Through careful observation and a series of strategic tactics, a manipulator is able to understand how the victim's thought system works and influences them. Manipulation often sounds like a big word, so much that we tend to think that only bad people do it. However, if your reason for learning about dark psychology, and by effect, manipulation, is to guard against it, then you have to understand that anyone can be a manipulator. Of course, the manipulator can do great harm, but it can be more subtle and less harmful as well. Manipulation and persuasion. Manipulation includes a wide range of actions aimed at maliciously controlling another person's behavior. Because of this definition, people often have a hard time distinguishing between manipulation and persuasion, which is another dark psychology tactic. We will cover the art of persuasion later in this book. However, it is important to clarify the differences between them before proceeding further. Both persuasion and manipulation are tactics used to influence others. The difference between them is really just a matter of social constructs, but the end goal is usually similar. Society often perceives persuasion as a more benign version of manipulation. This automatically gives manipulation a negative connotation, and persuasion a much more positive outlook. You manipulate someone into doing something they wouldn't have done of their own free will. With persuasion, you convince or influence someone to do something that there was a possibility of them doing in the first place. We can therefore conclude that persuasion is a type of manipulation, but there are other tactics involved in manipulation that may be beyond the scope of mere persuasion, such as blackmail, reinforcements, deceit, and so on. Ethical and unethical manipulation. Manipulation is often classified as either ethical and unethical. This is based on the perception of whether an action is inherently right or wrong. The classification of manipulation this way recognizes what has been said earlier about the motive for dark psychology. It is common for people to associate manipulation with a sinister purpose, but this is not always the case. People may manipulate others with the goal of benefiting themselves or other people, but without an intention to harm the victim. Thus, if the purpose of manipulation is to achieve something positive or result in a positive outcome within the generally accepted standards of good and evil, one could consider this ethical manipulation. However, if the result of manipulation brings harm to the person that is being manipulated or to others, there we could classify this as unethical manipulation, even if there is no sinister motive behind the action to begin with. Some techniques of psychological manipulation. In dark psychology, people often use the term psychological manipulation to refer to the act of influencing someone's thoughts and behavior using dark psychological tactics. It includes a range of actions, all with the same purpose of influencing a person's behavior for your own selfish purpose. If the dark psychology practitioner was a Batman, psychological manipulation will be his utility belt. It is a weapon replete with its own set of weapons. Most times, manipulation involves a range of psychological tactics which may include any of the following. Reinforcement. Reinforcement can be either positive or negative, and a manipulator can use either of these tactics as it serves their dark purpose. Reinforcement is a psychological tactic that accesses an individual's neural patterning system with the aim of imprinting a behavior using rewards and punishments. Think about how a dog is trained. They're often rewarded with treats when they follow a command or complete an action. With time, the dog starts to associate that action with the reward and will readily follow the command in the future in anticipation of a reward. It's the same in humans. A person's brain can draw a correlation between certain acts and their positive or negative consequences. A manipulator can hack into this framework of associating behavior with results to maintain control over the victim. So if the victim does something the manipulator likes, they may reward it, and if he does something that the manipulator does not approve of, it'll result in punishment. Positive reinforcement. Manipulators use positive reinforcement to encourage positive behavior by linking it to a positive outcome. The positive reward in this case can be anything from food to money, drugs, attention, or sex. Basically, the manipulator finds something that the victim needs or craves and dangles it in front of their face as a reward for compliance. Negative reinforcement. Like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement also links behavior to an outcome. However, in this case, the result of such behavior is a negative one. Typically, the manipulator aims to discourage the behavior by punishing a victim for exhibiting it. For instance, an employee may cut an employee's pay each time they complain about work conditions. This way, the employee is discouraged from complaining in the future. Negative reinforcements instill fear and limit independent thoughts with the goal of placing the victim under the manipulator's control. Deceit. Manipulators are usually masters of deceit. They're skilled at lying convincingly to create an illusion that will keep the victim subservient to them. They come up with grand stories that are so believable that you may not realize it is false. Deception is the art of hiding the truth with the goal of gaining an advantage over someone. It is one of the many layers that a manipulator uses. By claiming to be someone they're not or twisting the facts of a story in their favor, a manipulator gains the victim's trust or keeps it. The terrible thing about deception is that it is built on trust, one of the most vital emotions in human relationships. To trick someone that you're telling the truth even though you're lying, the victim has to trust the deceiver. People who trust easily are at great risk of being manipulated. Shaming or guilt-tripping. Another weapon in the manipulator's toolbox is guilt-tripping. A manipulator is skilled at turning the tables around and spinning the narrative, especially when caught doing something bad. They'll make you feel terrible for accusing them or questioning them about what they have done. Not only will this help them get out of the accusation, they often try to vilify the victim and turn themselves into a victim, while the actual victim is made into an abuser. This is a very common tactic seen in domestic abuse cases. A man who often hits his wife may claim that her character or her words are what prompted his own bad behavior. Adept manipulators often end up creating false narratives that will make the victim begin to question their own reality or judgment. Ultimately, the victim will grow unsure of their perception of the world and start feeling like they're losing their sanity. Other similar techniques to this is the use of evasive responses or noncommittal answers to questions asked, or rationalizing a bad behavior when caught. This causes doubts in the victim's mind as they increasingly question their own narrative. Sex and seduction. Some manipulators may employ sex or a promise of sex to achieve their objectives and manipulate situations in their favor. Sex can also be used as a positive or negative reinforcement to condition a victim. The manipulator may offer sex or withhold it from a victim as a way to get them to do what they want or dissuade an unwanted behavior. Seduction is actually one of the most dangerous forms of dark psychology. People who use this tactic seek bonds of attachment that are not based on mature affection. Instead, it is based on traumatic bonds that can potentially create psychological wounds. Using dark psychology and seduction may occur in various ways. Some of the common examples include regression seduction. Usually, someone who has experienced a type of pleasure in the past will always seek to relieve it again. This is the principle on which this kind of seduction is based. People who use this technique often target the most deep-rooted pleasurable memory that a person has. In most people, this is usually memories of their early childhood and is unconsciously associated with a person's parental figure. The target is brought back to that point in their life by being positioned as a needy child. Such conditioning will elicit an emotional response that can be used to seduce and manipulate the victim. Judge seductions. This is similar in some way to the regression seduction, since it involves conditioning the victim to seek pleasure. However, in this case, instead of the manipulator framing himself or herself as a parental figure, they assume the role of a superior, causing the victim to seek their approval and love. Traumatic bonding. In this case, the victim becomes attached to the manipulator through physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. Like a case of Stockholm Syndrome, the abuse produces an effect that binds the victim to the aggressor as a survival strategy. Emotional roller coaster. The manipulator makes the victim become attached to them through a series of fights and repacification cycles that puts the victim in a sort of emotional whirlwind. The victim becomes unsure of their partner's emotions as well as their own. Caught in the confusion, they may become attached. Control through personal kinks. This tactic targets a victim by using their personal kinks, which they keep as a closely guarded secret known to only the manipulator. Because of this, the dark psychologist becomes the only one that can provide the sexual satisfaction the victim needs. They also know the victim's secret, which can be used as a weapon to blackmail or leverage to ask for favors. Love bombing. In love bombing, the manipulator makes their partner feel special through a flamboyant display of attention and adulation. In most cases, they're able to sweep the victim off his or her feet within weeks or even days with a grandiose show of love. This makes it easier to influence the victim as they deem fit. Punishment. Punishment as a manipulative tactic is often associated with negative reinforcement. However, the two differ quite significantly. With negative reinforcement, the goal is to associate an action with a negative consequence in order to discourage a victim from that behavior. However, there are instances where punishment isn't doled out to reinforce a behavior. Punishment can be used to weaken a victim physically or emotionally, or simply because the manipulator enjoys doing so. Punishment is part of a larger spectrum of manipulative behavior that aims to keep the victim dependent or too weakened to fight back. By weakening a victim physically or demoralizing them through punishment, the abuser puts him or her in a state where they're easier to prey on. Brainwashing. Manipulators are often charismatic and good with words. Thus, they're often good at brainwashing their victims to obtain what they want. Brainwashing involves removing a person's thoughts, motivations, and behavior, and replacing them with your own version of these things. A person can be brainwashed in different ways, but the most common approach is through manipulation. Some humans are naturally suggestible, and a manipulator that knows this can effectively brainwash them by repeatedly suggesting an idea. Reinforcements and other manipulative tools can also be employed to solidify this idea in the victim's mind. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a common manipulative tactic, especially in relationships. Manipulative people who use this tactic will try to twist facts and reality to their advantage and undermine your version of events. They will tell you that didn't happen, it's all in your head, or outrightly say you're acting crazy. Continuous exposure to this form of manipulation will have you doubting your sanity and sense of reality. As you feel less trust in yourself, you will inevitably end up justifying your abuse or mistreatment. A common gaslighting tactic is to hide toxic behavior under a mask of comedy. They'll claim you're uptight or you have a terrible sense of humor, while making terrible remarks or bad jokes at your expense. This helps them get away with saying terrible things while still maintaining an innocent demeanor. You should not allow anyone to gaslight with an excuse of innocent fun when it clearly wasn't. The only escape from this type of manipulation is to ground yourself in your reality and trust your own version of events. You can keep a record by writing things down immediately when they happen, or by telling a friend about your experience. Projection. Manipulative people hardly ever take responsibility for all the nastiness around them. If they did, it would mean they're admitting to being dark and manipulative, and that's not an image they want to have. So, what do they do instead? They often project their toxicity on people around them. The thing is, projection is something most of us do. Everyone hates being wrong, so we'd rather blame everyone else. But it's worse for psychopaths and narcissists. It's a common defense mechanism to deflect responsibility for bad behavior by claiming someone else did it. On your own part, projection could be making you susceptible to manipulation. When you project your own sense of empathy or compassion onto a toxic person, you'll assume they're good and won't see their manipulative nature even if it's staring you right in the face. You have to understand that not everyone has the same value system as you, and stop rationalizing their exploitative behavior. Deliberate misunderstanding. Do you have someone close to you that always seems to misunderstand everything you say or twist your words? This is a common manipulative tactic that may be used to control you and the people around you. Maybe you made a comment to them about a friend that tends to make decisions without considering the full ramifications. When reporting what you said, a manipulator may claim that you called your friend a loose cannon. People who act like this have no interest in understanding what you have said. They will generalize your opinion or make blanket statements that completely ignore the context of the conversation or the specifics of what you said. Everything is black and white to them, and they'll interpret whatever you say like that without considering nuances. Moving the goalpost. Manipulative people often change goalposts to preserve a specific narrative that they have in their minds. This is a logical fallacy that allows them to remain perpetually dissatisfied, or makes your opinion perpetually wrong. During an argument, if you're able to provide all the evidence to validate your position, they'll set up a new argument or introduce a new angle to the argument that requires you to either change your position or provide more proof. You can win with such people, and you shouldn't play that game. You'll only end up feeling constantly deficient or unworthy. Change of subject. We all do it every time, and it's mostly harmless. Trying to switch a topic when you're not comfortable with the topic of the conversation, or you'd rather talk about something else, is not bad in itself. But for a manipulator, this is one of the many tricks that they can use to avoid accountability. They're fond of rerouting discussions to ensure that it benefits them and changing subjects when the conversation isn't going in their favor. Watch it when someone tends to do this often. A simple trick to fight back is to ignore the attempt at distraction and continue making your point. You should also point out the obvious attempt at redirection to make them know that you're onto them. Bullying. Bullying is not just something you experience in the classroom or school playground. It can be seen in all spheres of society and in all human group interactions. There are bullies at work, among a group of friends, in relationships, and even in politics. Toxic bullies may not just target you directly. When they can't control you, they tend to target people around you and use them against you. They may label you as toxic or start a smear campaign against you to ruin your reputation and get others to bully you. The best way to deal with a bully is to call it out and not tolerate it. Internalizing bullying will leave you feeling deficient. Divide and conquer. One of the smartest strategies that manipulatives use, especially in group interaction, is the divide and conquer tactic. They try to distract everyone from their nastiness by getting them to focus on someone else. In a group, manipulative people may pit two people against each other. Sometimes you're the weapon they're using against somebody else, and you must be watchful for it. Beware when a friend or colleague seems to love you while fiercely denigrating someone else in the group. It happens in relationships as well. Abusive people tend to have only bad things to say about all their exes. They'll devalue them while showering you with all the love. It's only a matter of time before you end up receiving the dose of mistreatment that those exes received. Much more than how you're treated by someone, be attentive to how they treat or speak about other people too. A vile person is a vile person, and the fact that you're receiving all their love right now does not excuse their bad behavior. In fact, in most cases, you're just a tool to them. They'll get you to focus on another person as the threat, reporting back the bad things that the person supposedly did. You'll be surprised to find out that they're reporting you to the third party as well, and you all are just pawns in the nasty game they're playing. This technique is known as triangulation. The good thing is that you can also use reverse triangulation to expose a manipulator by gaining the support of the third party instead of turning against each other. Why people manipulate others. The question of why people manipulate others is one of the most critical questions to ask when the subject of manipulation is touched on. As we've established, manipulation can be either ethical or unethical. Regardless of the circumstances, the basic idea behind manipulation is that the manipulator wants you to do what they want, rather than your own desires. Even when the manipulation is being done for so-called ethical reasons, the manipulator still wants you to behave in ways that are not consistent with your own thoughts or beliefs. When examining dark psychology, the question of motivation is important because it reveals the argument between pathological and purposeful actions. It raises the question of whether or not the manipulator seeks to manipulate out of a narcissist's desire for control, or they're doing so due to much deeper and selfish pathological reasons. Regardless of the motive of the manipulator, whether sinister or not, the fact still remains that manipulation is born out of a desire for control. Naturally, every human has the right and the ability to engage in purposeful action, which represents their free will. But in manipulation, the manipulator believes that their free will is more important than yours, so they choose to make you act in a way of their choosing. Even if the motivation is positive and the result is benign, The goal of manipulation is still control born out of a desire to see their desires triumph over yours. It's like when you seek to control your dog using positive or negative reinforcement. The goal is to be able to control the actions of your dog. Whether you're trying to dissuade the dog from jumping into your bed, or you want it to be able to fetch objects for you, the goal is to be able to control the actions of the dog in ways that please you. This is the same with manipulation. The manipulator seeks control over the actions of someone else, and they use the various tools at their disposal to achieve this aim. Typical characteristics of a manipulator. Manipulators usually behave in ways that tend to overlap with the main character traits that are associated with the dark triad personalities of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy explained earlier in this book. People with personalities that fall in this dangerous spectrum tend to engage in actions that wantonly harm and destroy other people without caring about the consequences. While they may not always be psychopaths or narcissists, manipulators are diagnosed with traits of these personality disorders. Some of the main characteristics that manipulators tend to exhibit include a disregard for the feelings and desires of other people. As we have established, people who seek to control others do so because they consider their own feelings to be more important than others. This is why narcissists fit almost perfectly into this categorization. They have a disregard for other people's emotions, and they consider their own desires to be the most important. Unconcerned about harming others. People with a broken moral code or with a warped sense of right and wrong often have no issues manipulating others. They don't feel remorse, so they don't care about harming others, including those that they have a close relationship with. They may also rationalize their actions to feel better about harming others. Strong emotions of love or hate. Love and hate are two emotions that motivate manipulation. People who have difficulty regulating these emotions may end up manipulating the subject of these emotions and the people around them just to have their way. Skillful at insinuating themselves with others. Manipulators have a high sense of emotional awareness. This makes them quite adept at associating themselves with other people and gaining their trust. This is necessary since trust is one of the most important weapons that manipulators use against their victims. Skillful at keeping secrets or hiding their intentions or motivations. Manipulators are masters of deceit. Keeping the truth away from their victims is one of the most important weapons in their arsenal. It'll be difficult for them to maintain control if people are able to see them for who they are, or become aware of their intentions. So the first thing manipulators do is create an image of themselves that the victim will love or respect. Highly perceptive. Perhaps the most important trait of manipulators is their ability to come up with a weapon of attack based on the victim they're dealing with, or based on what is needed at the moment. Manipulators are very observant and perceptive. They're good at studying people and will make a quick mental note of who you are so they can use this to control you. Manipulators are not random in their selection of prey. Rather, they look out for specific traits in their victims, and this is what attracts them. People with certain vulnerabilities are more susceptible to the whims of a manipulator. For instance, an assertive person with a social personality will be harder to manipulate compared to a lonely person with poor self-esteem. The latter will be more eager to please and will seek external validation, which the manipulator can easily twist to achieve their sinister aim. Of course, that's not to say assertive people cannot be manipulated too. However, they must have a specific personality flaw that manipulators can take advantage of. Manipulative individuals look out for these personality weaknesses and use them against their victims. Whether the person is impressionable and easily fooled by appearance, or is brash and prone to impulsive decisions. They also target greedy people, materialistic individuals, or people suffering from addictions. The manipulator's skill of perception allows them to read their victims carefully enough to determine their weakness and value system within a short time. They don't have to ask you about these things. They're great at getting information from the things you say and or even do unconsciously. Because manipulators are predatory, they can potentially take advantage of any slight opportunity they get to use their predatory tactics. They might also try different tactics on you until they find what works best to continue manipulating you. Knowing all of these, the best way to defend yourself against predators is to show no weakness. That is not to say you must be perfect, but showing your weaknesses to everyone will make it easier for a manipulator to know the tools they can use against you. You should also pay attention to the people around you. Although manipulators are highly perceptive, and they do a good job of concealing their motives, there are certain giveaways that you may notice if you pay attention to. For instance, you should probably be aware of someone who repeats things that you never actually told them about you. It shows they've either been actively researching you or paying attention to you enough to know those things. Of course, this could just be someone who cares about you and is good at reading you. At the end of the day, some of the characteristics of a manipulator consist of both negative and positive qualities. Manipulators are also highly emotionally intelligent, and they're able to use this to their advantage and get away with it in most cases. Note that many people use these techniques without actually knowing about dark psychology. People may also do these acts subconsciously because of their psychological makeup. However, in many cases, they are premeditated and intentional. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Persuasion. One of the dark psychology tactics used to influence people is persuasion. Persuasion is difficult to define mainly because it tends to overlap significantly with manipulation. In fact, the debate between persuasion and manipulation has raged on for several centuries, with various philosophers weighing in their similarities and differences. The common consensus is that persuasion is a benign form of manipulation. It is defined as the act of guiding someone in a direction or convincing them to take any action or belief in something that they would otherwise not believe in. Even with this definition, it is still difficult to differentiate between persuasion and manipulation, other than the fact that one is perceived in a more positive light than the other. In the real sense, there's quite a thin line between these two concepts. Many people also try to distinguish between persuasion and manipulation based on the motive behind the act, basically a question of ethics. There are some schools of thought that believe that persuasion is ethical because it does not seek to harm the subject. In this sense, persuasion is ethically positive, while manipulation is ethically negative or unethical. An equally interesting field of reasoning is that persuasion is ethically neutral. This means it is an impartial process. That is neither good nor bad for the parties involved. Of course, this isn't always accurate. A more appropriate viewpoint is to consider persuasion as not neutral, but noble. This is a viewpoint held by the great philosopher Aristotle, who stated that persuasion is inherently good because it is a means of knowing the truth. Unlike manipulation, persuasion does not seek to take away a person's free will through deceit or other maleficent methods. Instead, the goal is to put forward strong evidence that seeks to convince a subject of a point. The subject can still choose to accept or reject the persuasive appeal. In persuasion, as with manipulation, the intention is to move someone to a position that they do not currently hold. But it is not done through cajoling or any other means that takes away a person's power of free will. Instead, the person doing the persuasion carefully prepares and frames an argument with vivid supporting evidence that elicits the desired emotional response in an audience. Here's an example. Say a salesman visits your home. They dress in attractive clothing and have an amiable personality, which helps to draw you in. The goal that day is to convince you to buy some new sheets. At first, you have no intention of buying from them because you've just moved into your home and you've recently purchased some new sheets to use for your bed. You also don't intend to buy new ones anytime soon because your budget for the month cannot accommodate such a purchase without cutting into your savings. However, during his conversation with you, the salesman asks about the sheets you currently use. He asks what material it is, and you tell him it's made from flannel material. You love what you have already because it's made from soft, comfortable fabric and is inexpensive too. The salesman agrees with you, but points out a problem you weren't considering before. Your flannel sheet is heavy and tends to trap a lot of heat. It's winter right now, so it works great for you, but the sheets will be useless when the weather warms up. Then he shows you samples of some alternative materials that can work for all seasons of the year. On one hand, it seems the salesperson genuinely wants to help you. He is attempting to influence you into purchasing a new sheet that you had no intention of buying before, and you don't even need right away. However, buying that sheet will be beneficial to you in the long run. The flannel sheet may not be all that bad right now, but you'll regret not replacing it with more comfortable sheets later in the summer. Of course, you can also decide to buy later, but you'll have to go to a store and go through the stress of searching for the right sheets again. At the end of the day, what the salesperson did was suggest an idea, then influence you into thinking that idea is right for you. Your sheets are useless during summer, and you'll need a new one. He then attempts to persuade you. Of course, he'll benefit as well, because he'll be making a sale. This is only one form that persuasion can take. It can also take other forms, from simple ones like convincing someone to go to one restaurant instead of another, to persuading your father to change his will and name you as a sole beneficiary. Regardless of how it happens or the different forms it takes, people generally regard persuasion as just a step down from manipulation. Indeed, there are elements of one in the other, and there's only a thin line between them. Influencing people. Persuasion is one of the most important skills that influential people wield. Throughout history, the most persuasive or manipulative people are known to have great people skills. They tend to get on well with others thanks to an arsenal of social skills which they use quite efficiently. To be influential, you have to possess high emotional intelligence or a high sense of self-awareness. This is necessary to tap into the emotional states of others in order to persuade them to do what you want. It is important to note that not all influential people are emotionally intelligent. Here's why. Empathy is an essential component of the emotional intelligence package. Manipulative people do not care about other people's feelings or emotions. They are sensitive, or emotionally aware, enough to recognize these feelings, but there is no empathy to stop them from exploiting them. In essence, you don't need emotional intelligence to be influential, but you need emotional sensitivity. Some of the other skills needed to influence people effectively include emotional awareness. And that's one important skill that all influential people tend to have. To be a good persuader, you have to be closely attuned to other people's emotional states. Basically, you must be good at reading people. Good persuaders watch people for cues. They are intentional with words, and they watch to see the impact of these words as they say them. Excellent memory. Influential people make a mental note of your responses to everything they say. They file these emotional reactions and triggers away in the recess of their mind, only to be used when they need to press your buttons to get what they want. They don't need years or months to do this. Their superpowers lie in the ability to make the needed assessments instantly and subconsciously. Excellent understanding of human nature and normal human behavior. Human beings are diverse and difficult to characterize. Even with similar backgrounds and experiences, two humans may evolve completely different sets of behaviors. While it is impossible to predict all human behavior, influential people have learned to understand the basics of human nature and characterize expected human behavior as accurately as possible. Knowing people is the key to winning them over. Ability to mask one's own feelings and motivations. Bad salespeople make it too obvious they're trying to get you to buy. That's why they probably won't make any sales. The 101 of selling anything is to mask your real motivations. Instead, the buyer should get an impression that you're trying to help them solve a problem. This is the secret to persuading and influencing people, even manipulating people. If your intention is obvious, people will most likely not follow along with it. Your ability to convince people lies in your ability to know how they feel while masking yours perfectly. Ability to identify with others and to get others to identify with you. This is another vital attribute needed for successful persuasion. If you want the thoughts of others to align with your own, the easiest way to do this is to establish a connection with your target that makes them more vulnerable to your suggestions. The easiest way to do this is to identify with them. Humans crave identification. They want to be seen by someone, and if a persuader can make them feel seen, they'll be able to convince them and influence them more readily. The trick is to establish a ground for commonality right from the onset. You stand a better chance of influencing someone if you can establish a rapport or create an emotional connection. For instance, if you can make someone smile or laugh, you're perceived to be someone that can be of help. You pay attention to the person's emotions or demonstrate that you know how they're feeling despite their best efforts to hide it. They're likely to open up to you like a book. To influence people, it is important that the person you're trying to influence sees you as someone that is just like him or her. If you're perceived as someone too different or someone that cannot relate to their feelings, they're less likely to listen to you. How conditioning works. When you're looking to influence others, one of the skills you must master is how to condition them to be open to influence. Conditioning in this sense refers to everything you do to prepare the person for persuasion. The concept of conditioning applies to manipulation as well. Conditioning can occur in various ways. Regardless of how it's done, the goal is to establish a sort of connection that makes the party you intend to persuade open to having their thoughts or behavior modified by you. This is a psychological process that is commonly seen when animals are being trained. But much more than a tool used by manipulators or someone trying to persuade you, conditioning is happening around you even as you read it. Most of the beliefs you have about life and people are a result of some sort of internal programming based on the things you've been exposed to, such as the books you read, movies you watch, and so on. Conditioning is how humans learn how to think and behave, and it continues throughout life. To persuade someone, you'll have to condition him or her to accept certain beliefs. Like in the example above, the salesperson could not persuade you to buy the new sheets without making you realize that the old fabric isn't good for hot weather. This is what opens you up to the idea they're trying to sell. As someone seeking to learn about dark psychology, understanding how the human mind can become conditioned by the information being presented to you is very important. The biggest defense against such conditioning is to be wary of the intentions of everyone around you. This way you receive every piece of information with a pinch of salt. Of course, being wary of everyone comes with its drawbacks, but it's your best bet to defend yourself against those seeking to influence you. Not everyone seeking to influence you is doing so with malicious intentions, but since there is no way to tell anyone's intention from the get-go, it makes sense to be wary of strangers. Over time, as you get to know someone better, you can be more open with your emotions while still keeping your cards close to your heart as much as possible. Chapter 5. Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP. Neuro-linguistic programming is a psychological technique that is aimed at changing a person's thoughts and behaviors in order to achieve the desired outcome. NLP is an actual field of psychology. It was started in the 1970s and is commonly used for treating phobias, anxiety disorders, and several other psychological issues. Dark NLP is based on the same principles as the conventional version of neuro-linguistic programming. Therefore, you have to understand the theoretical basis of NLP to apply this technique for mind control. Conventional NLP is a set of ideas that attempts to understand human behavior and how it can be influenced. The principle is a combination of a model of human behavior and some linguistic principles. These two fields were combined to formulate a set of techniques that can be used to understand the motivation behind human behavior and attempt to influence it. NLP is built on three core concepts. These are subjectivity, consciousness, and learning. According to NLP, humans have a subjective rather than objective view of the world around us. In fact, there's no absolute way to interpret or understand the world. Instead, each person forms a personal picture of the world based on their perceptions of data received through their five senses and the language they learn. According to this theory, the combination of sensory input and descriptive language is what leads us to how we behave. Our behavior can either be subjective based on our map of the world or harmful to our personal pursuits or aims. Like most fields of human psychology, NLP aligns with the belief that the human mind has both conscious and unconscious dimensions. However, many of the principles of NLP are based on the belief that the subconscious level of human thought has the most influence on human behavior. This belief opens the door to the possibility of people being controlled or manipulated through their subconscious minds in ways that they cannot perceive. In NLP, human behavior is divided into three aspects: the what, the how, and the why. The what. This is focused on the external behavior that a person exhibits in any given situation. The how. This is more concerned with the internal thinking pattern that goes on in the mind of a person before they make their decision. The why. This relates to the beliefs, values, and assumptions that drive a person's actions. The why is a vital decision-making factor that motivates people to take one direction instead of the other when faced with contrasting decisions. A clear understanding of these three aspects of human behavior is all that you need to completely model the reality of someone's behavior and understand how people behave. Naturally, the external behavior that a person exhibits should be a direct copy of the internal process. However, it is important to note that humans indeed have the capacity to show external behavior that does not align with their internal dimensions. In this case, their behavior is phony and insincere. If you are familiar with various fields of psychology, then you will know by now that what has been explained so far about NLP is basic psychology dogma. In these, NLP isn't remarkably different from many of the other psychological techniques that model human behavior. Where NLP takes a different direction is that it goes beyond passively analyzing and accepting the various components of human behavior. Beyond merely explaining why people act the way they do, NLP enthusiasts believe that these variables can be explored further and manipulated to achieve the desired result. This is because there is a sharp contrast between NLP and traditional psychology views on how people learn new behavior. The traditional belief is that humans learn new behavior by acquiring one skill at a time, which gradually adds up to form their entire behavior. NLP theorizes that it happens the other way around. The belief is that a person first encounters all the components of a particular behavior, and then proceeds to remove various parts until all that is left is only the essential parts. In essence, by refining behaviors this way using NLP, an individual is able to achieve a level of personal efficiency in their behavior. Additionally, NLP is concerned with the difference between those that succeed and those that fail. This is known as success modeling, a concept that seeks to discover what successful people do in contrast to those that failed at the same thing. Did they perceive the problem differently? Did they make different decisions? Or was it because of some aspects of their behavior that made them achieve different results? By simplifying the various factors that lead to success this way, NLP can be used to develop a simple process model which can help individuals achieve great results within a short period of time. Basically, the success model makes it easier to achieve success by simply adopting the method that has worked over the years. How does dark psychology NLP work? The principles highlighted above are some of the core principles of NLP that make it useful for modifying human behavior positively. While dark NLP is built on the same premise, it introduces some dark psychological principles into the traditional practice of neuro-linguistic programming. When dark psychological insights are combined with the manipulative efficiency of neuro-linguistic programming, what you get is a unique but twisted model of NLP that can be used to manipulate people's thoughts and behavior. Some of the main dark psychology concepts on which dark NLP is built include: humans have no concrete identity. One of the core principles on which dark NLP is built is the belief that human beings have no concrete identity. If this fact is taken to be true, then humans are more susceptible to being influenced positively or negatively than we think. Even in traditional NLP, the concept of human identity is considered to be quite fluid, which is why therapists can help people overcome some psychological issues by helping them reprogram their life. In dark NLP, the concept of the fluidity of human identity is taken to mean that an individual can be manipulated to behave a certain way based on the will of others. This opens the door to the potential for the malicious influence which dark psychology is known for. Humans are less in control of their will than they believe. Most people would like to believe that they're in perfect control of their will. However, there is evidence that suggests that the extent of control you have on your thought processes and resultant decisions are not as independent of external influence as you like to think. Under certain circumstances, a person can be made to make decisions that are against their free will. Milgram experiment. One of the psychology experiments that is commonly used to debunk the belief that humans are in perfect control of their free will is the Milgram experiment. In this experiment, volunteers of different age groups and from different backgrounds were made to administer an electric shock to someone each time the person failed a learning test. The result of the experiment showed that the majority of participants continued to administer the electric shock even when the shock was increased to potentially fatal levels, and they could hear the screams of the learner being punished. This experiment demonstrates that people will obey someone they perceive as an authority figure even when they're given instructions that conflict with the personal conscience of will. Zimbardo experiment. Stanford prison experiment. This is another experiment that shows that human behavior may not always conform to their free will and can be influenced. The purpose of the Zimbardo experiment was to prove that human behavior tends to change based on the role they've been assigned at any point in time. In this experiment, volunteers were divided at random into two groups. One group was to be prisoners, while the other was given the role of guards. At the end of the experiment, it was discovered that the volunteers given the role of prison guard were willing to carry out acts of cruelty and abuse because of the authority they were given. Together, these two experiments provide some insights into how human behavior can be influenced based on external factors, and they explain some of the core principles of dark NLP. Contrary to what many people like to think of themselves, people can be easily manipulated to do things against their will, and their behavior can be influenced by various factors. Of course, the majority of people choose not to believe this fact because of how disturbing that realization can be. However, the minority of people who believe in these ideas are better positioned to take advantage of them to manipulate naive people for their own selfish purpose. Priming. Another key concept of dark NLP is the concept of priming. This concept explains that human beings can be influenced to behave in certain ways by a wide range of factors that are outside of their perception. For instance, the choice of language and the tone of voice when talking to a person have been shown to influence how fast they react to the instructions being given. Priming also suggests that it is possible to plant ideas into people's minds subliminal, using carefully selected words that sound familiar to other words. When done right, the idea will be planted in the person's head without him or her being aware of what has happened. This technique is commonly used by hypnotists to do things without being aware. Influence by majority of opinions. While most people think that they are in full control of their faculties while making decisions, evidence suggests that many of the decisions we make are influenced by other people's opinions. People have a tendency to follow the herd even when such a decision does not align with their conscience or rationality. The concept of majority influence is what extremist groups usually use to get people to conform to their extremist ideologies. When surrounded by people that believe in certain views or opinions, a person may end up believing these same views. What's more, despite the fact that the decision was influenced by the opinion of the majority, the individual may still feel that they did so of their own free will. The techniques of NLP. NLP teaches you first to be a master of yourself before you can extend that mastery to exert control over others. The first step in applying neuro-linguistic programming practice is to understand how human thoughts and values drive the outwards outcomes they produce. NLP techniques are subtle yet effective. They are so difficult to detect that people who are unfamiliar with neuro-linguistic programming would find it difficult to detect the subtle tricks that experts use to bring them under control. Some of the most notable public speakers that give moving speeches make use of NLP techniques such as permissive language hypnosis to subtly captivate their audience. At the core of the practice of NLP is an understanding of how the human brain works and the various factors that motivate human behavior. NLP experts also have to master how to form a rapport with other people and understand the basics of human interaction. Just like a manipulator pays attention to their attention to catching clues that will reveal the person's emotional state, an NLP practitioner also has to pay close attention to the target to establish a connection and to find clues that reveal how the target thinks. They're also on the lookout for the perfect opportunity to induce a trance-like state in the victim. The following are some of the core techniques of NLP that will help you gain a total understanding of how their mind works and hack it to your advantage. Hacking anyone's secret blueprint. To control anyone through NLP, the first step is to figure out who the person is. This is commonly referred to as uncovering their unique secret blueprint. This is what makes them who they are. Every individual has several aspects to their personality, and NLP practitioners need to understand these different aspects if they'll potentially gain control over them. At the most basic level, they'll need to know the person's fears, doubts, hopes, what they like most about themselves, and what they dislike. Figuring out all of these aspects of an individual's footprint will show who the person really is and make it possible to be influenced. Understanding someone's fear. There are two main methods that NLP practitioners use to analyze a person's fear. It can either be passive or active. These two methods can be used separately or jointly as the case may be. Passive method. This method involves simply waiting and observing the target to find out the things they're afraid of. If you pay attention to someone close enough, sooner or later they'll talk about the things that bother them. Of course, the effectiveness of this method will depend on the person you're dealing with. Some people will simply tell you about their fears in clear terms. Others may not be as explicit, and they'll only drop minor hints which you can catch based on their demeanor and tone of voice when discussing such issues. Active method. Since the passive method may take a pretty long time, you may prefer to actively seek out the information you need about the person's fear. But that's not to say that you get to ask questions about the person's fear. This method involves steering a conversation towards those areas where you want the person to divulge information about themselves. Say you want someone to find out if a person has fears regarding their health. You may start up a conversation relating to health in general and observe the target. The response you get and the demeanor when talking about this topic may give you an idea of how the person feels about it. Knowing someone's hopes. Discovering a person's hopes is often easier to do than uncovering their fears. This is mainly because most people readily give up that information willingly, or with just a little prodding. A person's hope for the future is one of the things that guide how they live their life. Therefore, you can easily catch a glimpse of it by simply observing them. If it is proving difficult to find this information through observation, you can prompt the person to talk about it. A smart way to initiate this is to open up about your own hopes. It's a conversation a lot of people are willing to have and would easily give up theirs during a candid conversation. A manipulative, dark NLP approach of this kind of conversation is to twist your story in a way that increases the target's comfort in discussing such a topic. For instance, instead of talking about your hopes in a positive light, talking about your worries about it will make the target feel secure and comfortable enough to talk about theirs. This not only gives them permission to open up, but it also pushes them into revealing all the details, seeing that you were vulnerable enough to reveal yours. Knowing someone's doubts. Figuring out someone's doubts is relatively easy as well. The simple strategy is to observe the areas of a person's life where they're most confident, in contrast to where they're being conscious. When people are more cautious or hesitant about making certain decisions, it could be taken as a sign that this is one of the areas they aren't very confident about. Information like this can be very valuable for manipulating people with NLP. Knowing a person's likes and dislikes. This is probably the most obvious aspect of a person's personality to figure out. Most people do a bad job at concealing aspects of their appearance that they feel confident about and which ones they do not like. By studying how a person behaves in different scenarios, the clothes they wear, how they act in the presence of strangers, and other factors, you can easily tell how they feel about themselves. One of the most effective dark NLP techniques to discover a person's likes and dislikes about themselves is by giving them a targeted compliment. For instance, if you want to know how someone feels about their looks, you can tell them they look good. Someone who is confident about his or her look will accept your compliment with ease and comfort. Conversely, if they're not happy with their looks, they'll most likely not be comfortable with your compliment. Using what you have learned. Knowing someone's personal blueprint is only one half of the equation. The other half is how to make use of the information you've learned to control the choices a person makes or how they behave. A person's personal blueprint lays a foundation on which the other NLP techniques you intend to use will be built. For instance, if you want to use embedded language to steer a specific course of action in someone, you can use your knowledge of the person's hopes and fears and link it to the description of the action you want him or her to perform. A person's likes and dislikes can also be used to manipulate them in the same way. For instance, your knowledge of an individual's likes and dislikes about themselves can be used to raise or lower their self-esteem depending on the goals you intend to achieve. For instance, if you're trying to build rapport with someone or establish a connection, you can raise their self-esteem by using language that complements the things they like about themselves. By celebrating their ideal view, you're pushing them into friendly territories, which will make it easier to influence them, especially when you need them to do something that requires confidence. The same principle can be used to lower a person's self-esteem. After identifying the things a person dislikes about themselves, a subtle jab about such a dislike will bring the individual's insecurities to the fore. Of course, this must be done as discreetly as possible to achieve the intended effect of lowering the person's self-esteem without alienating you from them. For instance, if you know that a coworker is insecure around new people, you can comment about how they kept quiet in a meeting. Being able to control a person's self-esteem unconsciously this way gives you significant control over them psychologically. How to read someone's eyes. An important aspect of neurolinguistic programming is how to use eye movements to determine how a person's brain stores and processes information. Since NLP is strongly linked to your ability to read someone and redirect them based on what you know about them, learning how to read someone's eyes is very important. If you're observant enough, a person's eye movements can tell you more than they're willing to reveal. This makes it a great technique to determine if someone is being truthful or they're lying to you. How to use eye movement to determine if someone is lying to you. Do you know how a lie detector machine works? To calibrate the machine, the instructor will first ask you a series of basic questions, which you will answer truthfully. Your body reactions will be measured by the machine and used as a basis to determine when you're telling the truth or being untruthful. You can use the same principle when you're trying to determine if someone's lying to you or not. The first step is to ask a series of questions while watching the person's eye movement when you do. Start with basic questions that you know the answers to already, and you're sure the subject will answer truthfully, like the name, date of birth, and so on. Observe their eye movement when you ask this question. Are they looking to the left, right, up, or down? The direction they're looking at when answering these factual questions shows their eye movement when they're telling the truth. Next, ask them questions that would require them to use their imagination. You could ask them what their plans are for the holiday, or what they'd do with the prize money if they won the lottery. The direction of their eye when answering this question shows the pattern of their eye movement when they're using their imagination. In most people, this is either up or to the side. Make a mental note of this as well, because it shows you how the person's eyes move when they need to come up with an answer from their imagination. You can do a final test by asking a question that is sure to provoke a lie. For instance, if you're sure that the person is insecure about their income, you can ask them how much they earn. They'll most likely tell you a higher figure since they don't want to reveal the actual amount they earn. The movement of their eyes when answering this question is another indication of how their eyes move when they're lying. Now that you know the range of eye movements of that person under different circumstances, you can use this to calibrate your inner lie detector so as to determine when they're being truthful to you or inventing an answer to give you. Linguistic mind control. Another aspect of a person's mannerisms that can give you a glimpse of how their mind works is their choice of language. Here's a common example. During a conversation, people can show agreement by either saying, "I see what you mean," or "I know what you mean." They may also say, "That feels right," or "I hear you." Most people don't think much about words like this, but if you understand NLP, you'll know that this choice of language is a reflection of one part of the individual's subconscious. Someone who says, "I see what you mean," perceives the world primarily through their sense of sight. Similarly, the person who says, "I hear you," perceives the world primarily through their ears. Identifying a person's primary system of perception this way makes it easier to get them to agree with you by leveraging their primary means of perception. Interjecting your sentences with commands like see, listen, think about it, and so on, depending on the person's primary means of perception, will help you connect with them better and get them to listen to you. This knowledge can also be used in a counteractive way. For instance, if you want to get someone to do something, you can suggest the opposite idea in a language that is against their primary system of perception. This way, they'll reject the opposite idea you suggested and instead go for the real idea you want them to accept. A similar approach is to watch out for words that have special meaning to people. For instance, someone's favorite positive word might be the word brilliant or beautiful. They'll use the word to describe anything they find positive or intend to praise. Such a word has a strong level of emotional significance, and you can use it when you intend to trigger strong emotions in your conversations with that person. A person's language can also give you a glimpse into their internal state. Through your interactions with people, you can learn to read their words and understand how it reflects on their mood, behavior, and overall state of mind. Knowing these will ease your conversations with them and help you establish the level of rapport needed to exert influence on their mind. Mirroring someone. In observing people for the purpose of mind control, one of the key aspects of the person's behavior is their body language. In fact, learning to mirror body language is one of the most effective ways to subtly control a person's inner state. To use NLP effectively, you have to be a keen observer of body language. In your interactions with people, you should notice how they hold and carry themselves, how they move, how they express themselves during conversation, and how their body language varies based on their mood in different situations. You must observe all of these to the smallest details in order to copy them effectively and use them to your benefit. Once you've learned to watch people's body language effectively, you have to master how to reproduce it and subsequently use it to your own advantage. This is known as body language mirroring. As a dark NLP technique, mirroring body language allows you to create a physical and emotional connection with someone that makes them susceptible to your influence without them knowing. Step to mirroring body language. It is impossible to copy someone's entire body language one and for all. The best way to go about it is to start gradually and systematically. You can begin by copying just one aspect of the person's body language first, like the way they position their arms or how they place their legs when sitting. When you have mastered this, you can gradually learn more aspects of their body language and mirror these too. The goal is to be able to carry yourself exactly how the person does too. Of course, no one keeps the same body position indefinitely, which means you also have to start copying the changes they make too and mirror them as well. This is necessary to maintain the sense of rapport that you have already established with the target. Once you've been able to effectively mirror a person's body language, you'll notice that the person will open up to you more easily. This is because you've been able to subconsciously establish a level of rapport that makes them feel at ease with you. Mirroring people's external behavior makes them more likely to agree with your opinions and manifest your thoughts. Pacing and leading. So how do you know when you've been able to achieve the level of subconscious connection needed to influence people through mimicking their body language? One of the ways to do so is by attempting to physically lead the person and seeing how they respond to it. Leading involves trying to take control of your physical interaction with the target. After mirroring someone's body language for a considerable period of time and copying any changes that they make, you can now attempt to lead your physical interaction. For example, during your interaction with the person, you can change the position of your right hand to see if the person will copy the same thing. If the person responds by unconsciously copying the change you just made, it shows there's a deep connection between you already, and you may be able to lead them subconsciously. If you have gotten to this state with them, it means you can manipulate or influence their desires more easily. Note that copying someone's move doesn't always achieve the desired effect right away. Your attempt to lead the target may not be successful at first. This just shows that you've not been able to achieve the level of connection to make such a move possible. You'll have to mirror their body language for a little longer before attempting it again. Eventually, you'll be able to get them to follow your lead once you've established enough subconscious connection. Also note that you don't have to start with big noticeable movements. Small leads, like a slight move in the position of your hand or feet, are enough. You can do this as many times as possible until you're convinced that you've achieved the level of connection needed to influence their mind. Applying NLP principles, a willingness to accept. The major difference between those that are able to use dark NLP principles for mind control and those who can't is a willingness to accept that it is true and it works. People who reject the premise of this technique will be unwilling to put in the work needed to master the tricks of the trade. The tactics of neuro-linguistic programming have been used by cable news anchors, politicians, coaches, and other public speakers for years. It is a well-known yet underrated technique. This is why many of the targets of NLP don't even know that their mind is being influenced. The subtle nature of the art makes it quite a powerful tool for inducing people to behave in certain ways. Accepting that it works and can be used against you is also essential to protecting yourself from manipulation as well. Chapter 6: How to Read Body Language and Analyze People. The majority of people that want to learn about dark psychology do so because they want to learn about how to influence or control people. The focus in most cases is how to make people do stuff for you. However, there is a much deeper and more important aspect of dark psychology that people seem to miss, which is understanding and analyzing people. Knowing how to analyze people is in fact more important than controlling them. Dark psychology is not a magic pill for mind control. It isn't hypnosis or brainwashing. Controlling or influencing people with dark psychology begins with mastering identity. Look at it this way. Imagine if you have the most powerful military weapon in the war, capable of obliterating your enemy completely. You just have to input the coordinates of your target, and the guided missile will do the intended damage. Easy, right? Well, it would be easy if you have the most important thing, which is the coordinates of your enemy's location. The most important weapon in this analogy isn't the weapon of mass destruction you have in your arsenal. It is your enemy's location. Without it, your weapon is practically useless. This is why the subject of analyzing people is important in dark psychology. It refers to your ability to acquire important information about your target and utilize it correctly. It also involves understanding your environment and the context in which you are operating. That's not to say you have to know everyone you use dark psychology tactics on. Earlier in this book, I warned about trusting strangers because they can indeed manipulate you with some mind tricks. However, without a good knowledge of your target, you're merely throwing these random techniques at someone, and the results you will get cannot be guaranteed. Basically, the more you know about a target, the less effort you'll have to exert in trying to influence them. This knowledge will come in handy in applying dark psychology tactics for influence as well as in defending yourself against manipulators. Mastering the dark tactics of people control begins with knowing who you are on the inside. This is the first step before attempting to know the people you're dealing with. The true practitioner of the art must first take stock of who he is and analyze his own strengths and weaknesses. You must also define your values and determine the things you're willing or unwilling to do. As far as dark psychology goes, if I know you better than you know me, then I can influence you. At the same time, if I know you better than you know yourself, I can control you. Your ability to merge what you know about a person with the principles of influence that you've mastered is intelligence. Note that intelligence in this case isn't about being book smart or even emotional intelligence. We're talking about your ability to gather information quickly, subtly, and as accurately as possible. Analyzing people is an important skill to master. Knowing and analyzing people is your key to influence and the defense you need to protect yourself from manipulation. The more information you have about people, your environment, and situations, the less you have to worry about them influencing you. To master this art, you need to have a number of tricks up your sleeves. Some of the important skills you should have in order to effectively analyze people include understanding human nature and human behavior. I've used the dog trainer analogy one time too many in this book, but I'll have to use it again to explain this point. Ask yourself this question: what's the most important skill a dog trainer should have? Is it an ability to give the right instructions to the dog, or that they should know the right reinforcement skills to use to make the dog obey them? Now, both of these skills are important, but perhaps the most important skill of all is that they must know dogs. They must be familiar with different breeds of dogs and know the basic character traits of these dog breeds. The first step in analyzing humans is to have a basic sense of human behavior under normal circumstances. If you do not have this vital knowledge, you'll find it difficult to understand and interpret the actions and intentions of people when you watch them. It's not possible to know all humans and why they act the way they do. However, a basic understanding of the normal spectrum of human behavior is necessary to accurately analyze someone. The challenge here is that humans tend to have very original behavior that is unique to each individual. This makes the process of analyzing them a tad bit difficult. While there are typical human behaviors that are easy to characterize, people tend to deviate from these norms quite often. For instance, while it is common for women to feel jealous at the sight of their spouse with another human, not all humans feel jealous this way. Similarly, while it is common for humans to get greedy and violent in times of lack, there are many people that won't resort to stealing or any form of violence just to get what they need. Ironically, you'll be shocked to find out that someone that has everything they need may frequently take from others. The contradictions in human character notwithstanding, learning to analyze people begins with knowing how humans behave generally. This includes knowing how people behave, the spectrum of human emotions, and how these translate to human behavior. You also need to understand the factors that motivate humans to make the choices they make in different situations. One factor that makes it even more difficult to understand humans is the ability of people to conceal their intentions. This is something that people do really well. We all wear a mask that usually makes it difficult to tell our actual intentions. To decipher human behavior accurately, you have to be able to see beyond the veil they wear to reveal their true emotional state. Despite their best efforts to conceal their emotions, if you look closely enough, you'll catch the visible cues that give you an idea of how people truly feel. It could be how they laugh, how they gesture when they talk excitedly, a twinkle in their eye, and so on. Learning to analyze these things appropriately will give you a greater insight into human behavior. This brings us to our next point on how to analyze people: nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication. Knowingly or inadvertently, people give out little clues that tell you more about how they feel than what they're expressing verbally. Humans are social animals capable of communicating with each other outside of regular language. People typically evolved in closely knit groups or communities rather than on their own. Even though we have evolved highly advanced means of communication with numerous languages and complex vocabularies, we also developed an ability to communicate through signals that we give off whether or not we're talking or not. These nonverbal cues can be used to interpret a person's emotional state, intentions, and motivations. In fact, what people say and how they act on the surface can be quite unreliable when it comes to analyzing them. People can say one thing or act a certain way even when they mean the direct opposite. An ability to pay attention to nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, the position of hands, movement of various body parts, and so on will make it difficult for them to send you in the wrong direction. Differentiating fake from real emotion. Another skill that will be quite valuable in analyzing people accurately is your ability to distinguish between fake and real emotions. One of the complex behaviors that humans exhibit is the ability to pretend or fake emotions. Because people know that you're watching them and hoping to use how they act to interpret their motives, they often come up with various techniques to conceal how they truly feel. People can smile even when they're unhappy, or pretend that they're fine even when they're angry or hurt. This is the mask that people wear to protect themselves and also to attack others. You're encouraged to wear this mask as well, as it helps to protect you against people seeking to manipulate you with dark psychology. At the same time, you must be able to analyze people appropriately so that you can know if they're being real with you or not. To a dark psychology practitioner, you're nothing but prey that's being observed. They pay attention to your words, actions, as well as nonverbal cues. All of these things show them what's going on your inside. Your ability to put up a wall will make it difficult for the predator to manipulate you. At the same time, your ability to read them and determine their actual motive will help reveal the truth about them. They may put up a facade with fake smiles and pleasantries or pretend that they like you. But if you pay close attention, you may be able to spot a fierce look that gives away their real intentions. To protect yourself, you'll need to turn on your brilliance to spot fake emotions from a mile away. An understanding of human nature and your ability to see beyond verbal communication is your key to figuring out what people are trying to hide behind all the acts they put up. And when you finally get to see the discrepancy between what they're showing you and their real emotions, you'll be better prepared to relate with them. There are 3 guiding principles that may be helpful here. Always judge emotions against current events. Although human behavior is difficult to predict, the go-to emotion for most people is typically consistent with current events around them. If someone just got news of a relative's death or they lost some money, you don't expect them to be giddy with excitement. If someone is exhibiting behavior that is inconsistent with the events going on around them, you should probably be wary. Judge a person's emotions against what you know about them. Another neat trick to distinguish between fake and real emotions is to always judge the person's surface emotion with what you know about them. Say, for instance, you know for a fact that your friend John does not like Sandy, his next-door neighbor. Yet in the presence of Sandy, he always acts nice. Based on your foreknowledge of what John feels about Sandy, you can make inferences about John's actual emotions. When people show you who they are, believe them. People, especially manipulative people, don't lose their guards often. They're emotionally aware and quite skilled at hiding how they'll feel. If they ever slip up, it's only a matter of time. You'll only get a brief glimpse into their real emotions. When you do, be smart enough to trust your own instinct about your real identity. Make a note of the person you see when the mask drops and relate with them based on the possibility that this may be their real identity. Identifying a liar. One last skill that you'll find valuable in your analysis of people is how to know when you're being lied to. While some people have learned to conceal their emotions and motives by changing their nonverbal cues, people who lie use their words to misdirect you. Pathological liars are sociable people that have mastered the art of using their words to paint a picture of themselves, other people, and events that aren't real. If you're suspicious that someone is lying to you, here are a few tips that can help you analyze and uncover their ruse. Pay attention to the facts of their story. Most pathological liars love to talk, and that is their biggest undoing. If you pay close attention to the facts of their story, you'll be able to poke holes in it very easily. Don't get carried away by the flamboyant story. Just note some important facts and probably do a check on it later. You may be able to find some inconsistencies real easily. Confronting them with the truth. Confronting a liar with the fact is the final step in disarming them. In most cases, you may not be able to confront them directly, so that they do not know that you know the truth. Instead, you have to subtly confront them so that you can catch them red-handed. For instance, your friend lied that he went to a particular restaurant the previous day, even though you know that they didn't. You can ask for a minor detail like what they ate at the restaurant. Make a mental note of the answer they give. Sometime later, you can make a comment about the food, replacing their answer with something else. Say their earlier answer was lamb chops. You could ask the following day if the steak they had was tender enough, or comment that you want to go get some chicken from the same restaurant they went to yesterday. Liars often have a hard time keeping up with the tiny details of the lies they tell, and you can catch them this way. You're also doing it so subtly that it'll be difficult for them to deny. How to read body language. People tend to reveal more information from what they say than what they are not saying. Thus, the ability to accurately read and interpret body language remains one of the most important skills in the field of dark psychology. The physical cues that people demonstrate in their interactions with you are often a more accurate depiction of how they feel inside than what they're saying to you. As earlier explained in this chapter, most people wear a mask that conceals their real personality and hides their motives. The best way to find out what is beneath the mask is by studying the clues that their body language is showing. Being sensitive enough to catch these cues and interpret them correctly can alert you to a wide range of things. You may be dealing with a psychopath or narcissist whose sinister motive is perfectly hidden behind a friendly facade. Your perception of their body language can reveal their true character. Body language cues to watch. It is important to point out that the list of body language cues that people demonstrate is inexhaustible. Thus, for the scope of this book, we can only focus on some of the most notable ones that will be easy for you to recognize. When it comes to observing body language, the parts of the body that are most important because they convey a lot of information include eyes, lips, smile or frown, teeth, tongue, arms, hand, feet, hair, especially in relation to hands and fingers. As the list shows, many of the areas that give the most body language clues are on a person's face. This is the part of the body that is mostly associated with emotions in humans and other primates. Therefore, it is critical that you pay attention to it and watch out for the telling signs of how a person really feels. Here are some body language clues and what they might mean. Touch. If you know someone who is in the habit of touching other people frequently, such a person may either be possessive or prone to manipulating others. Touch is one of the subtle ways people test trust and also try to get people to trust them and relax around them. It's a subtle sign that may prompt you to let your guard down around the person, allowing them to influence you in some way. If you find yourself around someone like this, you should be wary of their true motives and pay closer attention to their words or actions, especially when you're not too familiar with them yet. Physical distance. This is one physical clue that is difficult to read because it can have different interpretations. Someone who keeps a physical distance or avoids personal touch may like or dislike you. How you interpret it depends on the context. Naturally, you would expect that someone standing close to you means they're comfortable around you or interested in you. Similarly, someone that keeps a distance between you can assume that they're not overly fond of you or they aren't comfortable around you. However, it's not always black and white like this. Someone who likes you but isn't confident may feel the need to keep a distance from you to hide their vulnerability. You just need to be able to judge their behavior based on the other facts that you know to interpret how they're acting at the moment. Movement of the hands around the hair and ears. Frequently moving the hands to touch one's hair or ears is a clue that is naturally indicative of shyness. Someone who has a romantic interest in you but is shy about it may frequently tuck their hair behind their ears unconsciously. People may also touch this part of their face when they are anxious or edgy. People who lie may also show this gesture as well. Of course, you have to be wary of this as well, since it is a sign that is easy to fake. A manipulator may do this and act shy around you just to give an impression that they're interested in you. Rapid, repetitive movements. People tend to make rapid, repetitive movements when they're angry or uncomfortable. It could also be a sign of dishonesty, so you can use this clue along with other telling physical signs to identify if someone is lying to you. In fact, a lot of people believe that someone that touches his or her face frequently while talking is lying. This is true in some cases, but it can also be connected with other feelings as well, such as anxiety, restrained emotions, or agitation. Open or closed body posture. A person's posture or body position, especially when they're seated, can give you an idea of their mood or demeanor. An open body posture, such as spreading legs wide apart while seating, placing legs or hands on the chair, and so on, often indicates that the person is in a good mood, comfortable around you, or feeling confident. Conversely, a closed or hunched body posture is indicative of a lack of confidence. It could also mean the person is sad or exhausted. A person looking out to manipulate someone may pick someone with a closed posture as a target because he or she appears vulnerable. However, the person with an open posture may also be picked as a target because they're in a good mood, which will make them more suggestible. The only difference will be the approach in either case. Chapter 7. Defending Against Manipulation and Mind Control. They say, attack is the best form of defense. This is true for dark psychology as well. The best way to defend yourself against manipulation or mind control with dark psychology is by learning all about it. By knowing how manipulators work, you can effectively evade their tactics and defend yourself against them. Manipulation is a toolbox with lots of tools in it. A manipulator has to use various tactics and subtle tricks to connect with potential victims, gain their trust, condition them to be receptive to his suggestions, and keep them subjugated to him. In addition to learning about dark psychology and everything in a dark manipulator's bag of tricks, there are a few tips to keep in mind. These will help you synthesize all that you've learned about manipulation and guard yourself effectively against them. Don't give away too much information to people about you. In fact, you should not reveal more than what is absolutely necessary to people. As we've established, manipulators thrive best on their ability to analyze people. However, since analysis requires abundant information, they'll find it difficult to manipulate you if you don't divulge the information they need. Of course, they don't have to ask you directly. Practitioners of dark psychology are observant, and they'll feed off the information they can glean from your behavior, action, and inactions. It's in your best interest that you don't give away too much, or they'll waltz right into your brain and take control of your mind. Take your time to analyze strangers before letting them into your life. Manipulators often target those that are closest to them for obvious reasons. It's easier for them to manipulate you because you trust them and have your guards down around them. Getting close to you also helps them learn all they need to learn about you and use them against you. While it's okay to seek relationships, you have to be careful about who has access to your thoughts and beliefs. That's not to say that you should consider everyone around you as enemies or monsters that are out to get you. That's not a good way to go through life. A more practical approach is to take your time when it comes to friendships. You should take your time to analyze people and uncover what their real motives are before you let them into your life fully. Be wary of overly friendly people. Manipulators leverage close relationships and friendships to execute their sinister plans. They know that you'll only let your guards down around people that seem to like you or care about your well-being. That's the reason why they want to be your friend as soon as possible. If someone seems to be going out of their way to be friends with you, it may be wise to keep your guards up around them. They might be giving you too much personal information about them, showing up unexpectedly, or acting nice to you all of a sudden. All these acts are meant to get you to let your guard down around them. If you do, it'll expose you to their whims and make you susceptible to them. Be self-aware. As earlier explained, most of the information people get about you may not be things you tell them verbally. The way we act and react to things may be telling others about us more than you want them to know. Being self-aware involves recognizing your own emotions and the actions they produce. If you pay attention to this, you'll have a better handle on your behavior, which will make it difficult to read you. Self-awareness will also help you recognize when you're being manipulated by someone else. A crucial part of self-awareness is knowing where your emotions are coming from. Emotions can originate internally, and they can be triggered from outside. If someone is subtly pushing your buttons from outside to make you act a certain way, self-awareness will help you catch this on time and nip it in the bud. A common trick is to pay attention to any new emotions that you might be feeling and try to track where it's coming from. If there's someone around you that seems to be related to these emotions, you have to pay close attention to them to avoid being mind-controlled. Learn the tricks and tactics that manipulators use. People who try to learn about dark psychology are either doing so because they want to control others or they want to learn how to defend themselves against manipulation. The key to staying one step ahead of psychopaths and narcissists is to learn all their tricks and how they do it. You should learn how manipulators manage to establish an emotional connection to people quickly. You should also master the art of deception and how manipulators manage to conceal their emotions and motives. Although manipulators tend to be very intelligent, they are humans too, which means there is a pattern to their behavior that you simply have to understand in order to keep them at bay. Be curious about motives. When someone asks you to do something, you should carefully examine the motives behind it. It's wrong to assume that other people have the same intentions as you or project your own beliefs and motivations on them. The fact that you're a good person motivated by a desire to do good to others does not mean everyone around you has good motives too. Manipulators often rely on people's naivete about motives to deceive them. The go-to trick when trying to persuade someone is to make them think that you have their best interest at heart. Then they plant an idea into your head and lead you into thinking that it was all your idea all along. Even when it seems obvious, don't just take people's words or surface emotions for it. Find out if there's a selfish motive behind every request so you don't end up being manipulated. Don't get caught in an emotional whirlwind. Humans are emotional beings, but it's easier to control yourself when you're only feeling one emotion at a time. Manipulators know this, so they often come at you with numerous emotional bombs that will pull the rug out from under your feet before you know it. If you find yourself experiencing a lot of emotional ups and downs in your friendship or relationship, chances are you're dealing with a manipulator. Living in such emotional turbulence is not healthy for you, because it makes it difficult for you to stay in control or see the situation for what it truly is. In fact, the cause of your emotional turmoil will be right there with you, waiting for you to fall into their hands after you've become emotionally drained. Be a little selfish. A little selfishness is healthy for you. It'll help you stay perceptive enough to see when you're repeatedly doing things that are of no benefit to you. This is one of the ways you can test your actions to see if you're being manipulated. If you discover that you're repeatedly doing something that ultimately benefits someone instead of yourself, then you might be dealing with a manipulative person. Of course, it's okay to help out your friends and family members when they ask for it. Just be smart enough to know when you're being taken advantage of or working for them to your own detriment. Be suspicious of strange or inconsistent behavior. Manipulators need to appear as someone they're not in order to get with you. They have to pretend they're good people, that they're weak, they love you, or that they have your best interest at heart. Maintaining this facade is a lot of work, and sometimes they slip up. You may catch a glimpse of their real emotions or motives if you pay close attention. Don't overlook it when someone seems to be exhibiting strange behavior or acting in a way that is inconsistent with what you know about them. You might want to distance yourself from them or put your guard up to avoid being manipulated. Wear a mask, but don't get carried away. To protect yourself from manipulation, you need to be cautious and intentional in your dealings with people. I've explained extensively how this will help protect you. However, an extra word of caution here is that you should not get carried away. It's okay to have your guards up around strangers, but be careful not to overdo it. The possibility of bad experiences may force you to change who you are or become someone else. But don't give in to it. Keep your emotional cards close to your chest, but don't get all guarded up that you miss out on great relationships and good people. Practical tips to protect yourself from mind control. All around you, people use the principles of dark psychology to get their way with others and get them to do their bidding. From politicians to self-help coaches, marketers, and other people whose jobs involve convincing others. Their motive may not always be sinister, but they affect you one way or another. You'll be surprised at the number of ads you see daily that unconsciously influence your buying decisions. Whether intentionally or unknowingly, these people persuade or even manipulate you into making decisions that you normally wouldn't use in dark psychology. Fortunately, there are some practical tips that can help you guard yourself against NLP mind control and other forms of dark psychology manipulations. Avoid eye contact. One of the most effective ways to make an emotional connection with someone is through eye contact. There's a reason why public speakers are encouraged to make eye contact with their audience and make it seem like they're talking to you directly. Even animal trainers engage with the pets they train by making eye contact with them. A simple but effective way to avoid getting controlled through this method is to move your eyes around unpredictably when in conversation with people. Not only will this trip them up, but will also make it more difficult for them to connect with you emotionally. Be wary of nonspecific language in conversation. One of the most popular techniques in hypnosis and mind control is the use of vague, nonspecific language to desensitize people. This technique has been shown to be very effective in controlling the thoughts and behavior of people. You should be particularly careful around strangers or public speakers that use vague language in their communication with you. Any form of nonspecific language should be taken as an attempt to manipulate you or control your mind. Always pay attention. People who don't pay attention are more likely to fall victim to manipulators. Manipulative people know this too, and they intentionally pick people like this as their targets because they're easier prey. Protecting yourself against manipulation requires a high level of self-awareness. In addition to being in tune with your emotions, you also have to watch out for external influence as well. Be wary of what people say to you, how they act around you, and their overall behavior. You'll only be able to spot inconsistencies in character and emotions by paying attention. Protect your personal space. I mentioned earlier how manipulative people tend to touch their target. They do it as a way to build gradual trust, and it may also be used as a way to put you in a trance state. One of the ways to protect yourself from mind control is not letting people touch you indiscriminately. Basically, stop letting other people touch you, especially strangers that you cannot fully characterize yet. Be cautious of people speaking gibberish. One common trick in the hypnotist's bag of tricks is the use of incoherent words that do not seem to make any sense at all. These types of words are meant to induce a trance-like state in the listener. You should be wary of people who speak this way because they may be trying to manipulate you. You hear this commonly in political speeches, just a whole lot of rubbish sprinkled with buzzwords while making little to no meaning. Pay attention to what someone is really saying. In every conversation, don't just listen to the words. You must pay close attention to what the person is saying or trying to say to you. This is the principle on which NLP is based. People who learn this art try to hypnotize you by throwing in suggestive words in their conversations. Being aware and alert will help you catch these words and avoid being hypnotized by them. Hypnotists and manipulators rarely use commands. They don't order you to do something or try point blank. Neuro-language programming and other mind control tactics work subtly. They use calm, permissive, and persuasive language to induce you into doing what they want. Be on the lookout for this to avoid getting blindsided. Avoid situations or people that try to guide you into a decision. NLP practitioners are skilled at what they do. Given the opportunity, they can control you to do what they want using various tactics. The best strategy is to avoid them or get away from such situations as soon as you detect what they're trying to do. This applies to manipulation as well. If you discover that someone is trying to guide your actions or get you to make decisions that you don't want to make, you need to get out of there and do so fast. Sometimes closing the door on relationships or shutting down conversations with such people is the only way to escape being manipulated. Trust your intuition. When it comes to catching people with strange or inconsistent behavior, catching them red-handed will be difficult. However, you may catch a glimpse of their true self once in a while. If you have a strange feeling about someone, it is best to trust your intuition. You can either probe further or simply avoid the person. If something seems strange to you, then it probably is. Conclusion. Thank you for making it through to the end of this book. I hope it was informative and able to provide you with all the tools you need to achieve your goals, whatever they may be. Analyzing people can be a useful tool to better understand your surroundings and situations so you can maneuver them better. Though the idea is often misunderstood as learning how to force someone to do something against their will. Most of these misunderstandings are based on myths or guesswork by people that don't really understand the subject. My hope is that this book sheds the right light and helps you analyze people with the intention of improving your life and prevents psychological tricks from leading you down a path you didn't want to go in.